Hi, I'm Celeste Raver, the Director of Influencer Development in the Stockdale Center. And I'm sitting here with Dr. Joe Thomas, the Director of the Stockdale Center. And we want to talk a little bit about the Influence the Influencer initiative here at the Naval Academy. And so the best way to start is actually to understand the history of the Influence the Influencer program. And Dr. Joe Thomas is a great person to ask that question to. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of the program?
Sure. I think the Naval Academy has been thinking for an awfully long time about how to develop its staff, faculty, coaches for their task. And I'm not referring now simply to the specific role that they play here, soccer coach, chemistry professor, what have you, but rather the bigger picture of the very purpose of the Naval Academy to develop midshipmen morally, mentally, physically, for very specific roles as leaders. So that conversation about how to think of the key influencers around here as the developers of leaders themselves, I'm sure goes back a long, long time. But in the context of the Stockdale Center, the first time these ideas were formalized, the real strategy took shape, was in about the 2012 timeframe. And working hand in hand with our colleagues in Leadership Education Development Division, the idea first looked like, from a strategic perspective, strategy, of course, is typically defined as ends, ways, and means for accomplishing something. The ends we looked at were to build better leaders, right? So leaders building leaders was the catchphrase used in almost every document between 2012 and 2015. And it was in that span, in those years, that we started to flesh out ideas in regard to the ways of doing that. So on that point, let me turn the tables then, Celeste. Why don't you tell us what we're doing right now, where it stands in regard to that strategy, ends, ways, and means, perhaps, and where you see this whole thing going into the future.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'd say it took about 12 months to kind of figure out what the patterns were and what the best approach was for really developing leadership developers, which is kind of the framework I've used for the Influence the Influencer programs. Because when we think of the faculty, staff, and coaches here at the Naval Academy, they're really developing our leaders. And one of the things I observed over those 12 months is while everybody at the Naval Academy sees their contribution to the mission and they see their role and how they're developing midshipmen mentally, morally, and physically, whether it's in the classroom, on the sports field, or even in Bancroft Hall, they may be not totally sure about the fundamentals of leadership. Now, they may have great leadership experience and great exposure, but there's some nuanced kind of academic components of leadership that are helpful to understand when we're developing future naval officers. So as I observed that, I thought about, well, what's the best way to kind of help everybody understand this kind of broad field of leadership, and then understand how to develop midshipmen as leaders, not just as academics or on the sports field. And so with that, over the past 2 years, or really the past 12 months, I'd say, we've spent a lot of time focusing on providing a variety of things, whether it's long-term programs for our faculty, staff, and coaches where they can take part in what's called our Stockdale Associate Fellows program, and they take part in the program for a year. They get to know a cohort of about 20 other faculty, staff, and coaches. They learn academic leadership curriculum tied with experiential opportunities that the midshipmen take part in. So they can understand how do they take this leadership concept and tie it with an experiential learning opportunity that they can then take within their own sphere of influence with midshipmen. We've also decided, that's a great program, but there's times people can't necessarily commit for a whole year. And so we've gotten to the point where we're actually offering a lot of short-term programs. Faculty, staff, and coaches can pop into like an hour-long luncheon session or a short workshop that takes place over 2 days for about an hour and a half each day, and really dive deep into some of these topics like emotional intelligence or just the broad field of understanding how you define leadership and why that's important at a place where we're graduating leaders. And so that's kind of where we are currently. But the question, I think, is like where we're going.
Right.
And that's, I think, what's fun, is really to help everybody at the Naval Academy. So that's the programming, but help everybody at the Naval Academy understand their specific role, whether it's in the classroom, on the sports field, and the pieces of that role that tie to leadership development. And that's kind of a culture shift.
Yeah.
Not that everybody doesn't see their role in developing midshipmen mentally, morally, and physically, but they see their role in developing them mentally, morally, and physically as leaders for our nation.